The recent federal clemency granted for a weapons case centers on an individual, Daniel Edwin Wilson, who had been involved in the events of January 6, 2021. This action was particularly notable because the individual had remained incarcerated despite receiving a broader, sweeping grant of executive clemency earlier for his actions related to the Capitol incident. Wilson was serving a 5-year sentence for federal firearms violations, specifically illegal possession of weapons and ammunition, due to previous, unrelated felony convictions. The key legal complexity arose from the fact that the weapons charges were uncovered during a search conducted by federal agents as part of the massive investigation into the political events of 2021. The question before the courts was whether the initial broad clemency intended for offenses related to the political event also applied to these ancillary crimes that were only discovered because of the investigation. The new, specific pardon explicitly addresses and nullifies the firearms conviction, leading to the immediate release of Wilson, who had been scheduled to remain in prison until 2028. The White House justified the action by arguing that the charges should never have been pursued, as the search leading to the discovery of the illegal weapons was directly attributable to the investigation of the political event. Reasons for the executive action. Two primary motivations appear to drive the executive action in this case: political alignment and a challenge to procedural enforcement. First, the decision strongly signals political solidarity with supporters who faced federal scrutiny following the 2021 event, by intervening in a case that many supporters viewed as governmental overreach. The executive branch reinforces loyalty and sends a clear message that it will use its constitutional authority to protect those who were scrutinized in the subsequent, wide-ranging investigations. This use of clemency shifts the focus from the legal merits of the original firearms conviction, which was rooted in Wilson's status as a prohibited person due to prior felonies, to the context of how the charges were discovered. Second, the pardon serves as a substantive challenge to the judicial and prosecutorial handling of cases ancillary to the 2021 events. The official rationale, that the search was solely a consequence of the investigation and therefore the resulting charges were unjust, effectively attempts to nullify the legal process. This action asserts a broader executive authority to interpret and override the scope of federal investigations, particularly when the target of the investigation is deemed to be a political ally. The pardon resolves a complex legal debate about the scope of clemency with a definitive, non-negotiable exercise of executive power. Consequences and implications. This specific clemency has several significant consequences for the justice system and the future of executive power. Erosion of judicial independence and clarity. By overriding a judicial sentence, and doing so after a debate about the application of an earlier pardon, the action can be perceived as undermining the integrity of the Justice Department and the judiciary. It complicates the understanding of how presidential pardons interact with statutory federal disabilities, particularly those concerning firearms possession for prohibited persons. A presidential pardon generally restores civil rights, but the timing and political context here add layers of ambiguity to the legal status of the recipient moving forward. Expansion of clemency scope. The justification that the weapons charge was pardonable because it was discovered during an investigation of a separate politically motivated event sets a dangerous precedent. It potentially allows executive clemency to extend far beyond the explicit crimes being investigated to cover any unrelated illegal possession or contraband found in the process, provided a political connection can be established. This expansion politicizes the traditionally neutral, merit-based clemency review process. Impact on accountability. The pardon deepens the societal polarization regarding accountability for the 2021 events. To some, it is seen as correcting an injustice where legal precedent was stretched to punish a political opponent. To others, it represents a selective application of justice, where political favor outweighs the public safety concerns associated with illegal firearms possession by a previously convicted felon. Future outlook and potential solutions. The clemency for this weapons case strongly suggests a continued trend of leveraging executive authority to reward loyalty and challenge the judicial outcomes of politically charged events. Prediction: it is highly likely that future clemency decisions will follow this pattern, focusing on individuals involved in politically sensitive cases and expanding the justification to cover related or ancillary charges. This may lead to further legal battles centered on defining the precise limitations of executive clemency power, especially when it conflicts with mandatory federal statutes like those regulating firearms possession. Solutions and mitigation. Addressing the complexities raised by this pardon requires systemic and deliberate efforts. Statutory clarity. Congress could legislate clearer, more explicit definitions regarding the interaction between federal pardons and pre-existing legal disabilities. Specifically, legislation could clarify whether a pardon for a certain offense automatically nullifies the consequences of prior, unrelated felony convictions that impose a ban on firearms possession. Reforming clemency procedure. While the presidential pardon power is nearly absolute, future administrations could commit to a standardized, apolitical clemency review process through the Office of the Pardon Attorney. This would enhance transparency and ensure that decisions are based on traditional criteria such as rehabilitation, proportionality of sentence, and public interest, rather than political expediency. Judicial resilience. The judiciary must maintain its independence and continue to challenge attempts to stretch the legal interpretation of clemency to cover crimes clearly outside the intended scope. This resilience is vital to prevent the blurring of lines between political action and judicial process, thereby preserving the rule of